So this artwork is more tonal, less crisp than the geometric artwork, and we can still color separate it or index it so that it's forced into a specific number of colors. The first thing I always do is look at the file and imagine how many colors I actually want. So in this case, I would want a white ground and maybe 2, 3, maximum 4 shades of red. Uh, 2 light greens and maybe one of the darker greens. This is a scan file that has not been adjusted at all. So before I actually index it, I'm going to adjust the levels by going to Image, Adjustments, and Levels, and sort of follow the golden rule here, which is to move the triangles up to the edge of the mountain if there's any space here, to correct the brightness and contrast of the file. Basically cleans the scan. You can also manually clean out information that you might not want. For instance, there's some dirt down here and a little bit of darkness over here that I could just make white so I don't have to worry about it later. I can also get rid of these motifs that are chopped off because, well, that one will stay. They're not going to become part of my design because they're chopped off. So I'm going to go ahead and use white and just select areas where I'm going to get rid of things. You can use any tool you want to do this, but I'm using the lasso because I have the most control over it after having practiced it for some time. I'm even going to get rid of this very large tomato. And this one is a little bit chopped off, but I can always repair the little bit of a missing part there. So I'm just going through and getting rid of areas that ideally would just be flat white. And then edit, fill, and I'm going to fill with the foreground color because in this case it's the white. And then I'm going to deselect, Command D on the keyboard. So you can see in here that it's actually a gray ground and white. So when I get rid of those areas, assuming that they're going to be white, I actually ended up creating a second color. So when I'm doing my separation, I'm going to select gray and white in this case and then combine them later. So what I'm going to do is go to Image Mode. I'm on RGB color because this file has millions of colors in it from the scan, and I'm going to Index Color. I'm going to take the preview off because it's automatically defaulting to the last used palette, and it's almost always wrong. So I'm going to take preview off, and then I'm also going to go in here and go to Custom and get rid of the existing colors. So I'm going to start with white, select the whole thing, and then if I click OK twice, it'll basically create a gradient between the first and the last, so white to white. And then click, well, not closing it, sorry. I'm going to go ahead and click my colors. So starting at the first chip, I'm going to choose the pure white, and then I'm going to choose this sort of gray color. And then, as I said, I'm going to choose a few shades of red, and just to make my life easier, I'm going to pick them in an order from light to dark, correcting before I move on. Like this one looks too much like the other one, so I'm going to select a darker shade. And this gradient is going to mean that when I recolor it, everything's very organized. So you can always revise the number of colors as you go. After selecting the initial ones, I can go back to this initial palette and hit preview and see how it looks before I separate. So this is how the separation would look with only, I believe it's 8 colors that I chose, as opposed to 256 million colors from the original file. I can't zoom in right now because I'd have to close this menu and I'm not ready to yet, but I want you to look in this area here and see how kind of blotchy it is. There is an option for dither. Dither basically is a diffusion technique where the pixels get mixed up to look tonal. So right now it's on none, so it's going to look blotchy like that. If I change it to diffusion here, you'll see that it just blended all of those pixels together. That's appropriate for anything watercolor or tonal. It's not appropriate for something really flat like a gouache painting or a flat geometric that you made on the computer, but it's important to know that it's there. So I'm going to click OK and be done with this separation. The last thing that I'd like to do is zoom in so that you can actually see that technique that's happening here where it's blending things together. And in this case here, you'll notice that instead of using all greens, a little bit of the darker reds were used in here to create the tone. If I needed this to be all greens, I would go back to the separation, basically undo what I just did, edit, step backwards, and then go back into the index menu, which will have the same information as when I left it. I'm going to take preview off. And I could add to the colors that are in here so that it doesn't end up using red and instead it uses brown. And putting the preview on here, you can see that it changed the way it looked by selecting that brown that I gave it instead of using reds with the green. So I'm much happier with this. I'm going to say OK. And then I'm going to bring you back into the mode menu, and instead of going to indexed or RGB, I'm going to go down to the color table, and the color table is like the exact same color table that we just created, but I can access it outside of the indexing palette. And here I can change any of these colors. So I can click on the white and say, you know what, let's make the background bright blue so that we can see it. And here I can also make the background bright blue so I can see it. So you can change any of the colors in the image this way here. What I really want to do is make those two background colors the same color. So I would click on one and then drag to the next one and make them both pure white. So any other problems I can manually fix, like there's definitely some confusion here about what was supposed to be white and what was supposed to be these light greens. So the easiest thing to do here would be to just draw away the quote-unquote dirty areas and fill with the color that you want. And you can use any drawing tool. You can use the brush tool if you're more comfortable with that, or the pencil tool. Here's the pencil tool. Doing a very nice job. And moving along, I'm going to go back to the lasso tool so I can get this a regular shape and add to it. And this way you can clean up your scan file and prepare it for recoloring. We don't do a ton of recoloring in Photoshop. I really like to do most of that work in Net Graphics, but as someone who works primarily on Photoshop, it's really important for me to show you how you can get by without that expensive program. So just going to do this last bit here and save the file.